Hi students, hope everyone is fine and safe. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to my new video, and today's video is about another interesting concept in the subject short range wireless communication. We're going to see different types of antenna that is used for short range radio devices. In previous videos we have seen what is short range communication, what are the devices that is used for short range communication, and then we have seen what are the technologies that is associated with short range communication, and today we are going to see what are the different types of antennas. And in this types of antennas, in this video we are going to see only dipole antenna and monopole antenna. Dipole antenna is a very basic antenna where the length of the antenna is 1 by 2, that is lambda by 2. I have already said this lambda plays a very vital role in determining the size of the antenna, right, and the performance of the antenna, right. And wavelength is very important, right. Only if we have at least half a wavelength of that particular wave, we can able to make the antenna to transmit and receive, which means you have to understand what is wavelength and frequency, right. So if you take any particular sine wave, frequency is the number of cycles, right? Number of cycles it repeats, right? And it is nothing but the inverse of time period. So it is nothing but the number of cycles in a time period. That is the frequency. Inverse of time period is frequency. Whereas wavelength, it is the distance at which the cycle repeats. That is the distance of one particular cycle, that is called as wavelength. So here if we say this is one wavelength, for example, then dipole should have at least half of this wavelength, right, to make the antenna to transmit and receive. So that is dipole antenna. And what is monopole antenna? Dipole antenna, it has a lot of advantages. We want to see the features of dipole antenna. But with all those advantages and features, we will not be able to use dipole antenna very effectively in short range devices. That's because of its size, right? We know that short range devices are very small portable devices where we will not be able to fit this dipole antenna with that short devices. So what we can do is we can go for monopole antenna. Monopole antenna is derived from the dipole antenna, where instead of this lambda by 2, it will be having, this is the monopole antenna, right, where you will be having only one element, which is lambda by 4 of size, right. So it will take only one part of it, that is this part alone, right. And we can have a ground, right. You can see here there is a ground terminal, right, where is connected to only one element, right. So if instead of two element, if you use only one element, that is called as monopole, as simple as that. And the size is lambda by 4. Right, and most of the short range devices will have this monopole antenna. You will see the features of dipole antenna. So as I said, this is the dipole antenna, where dipole antenna is fit from the center, where you will be having equal length at both the sides, and the total length will be 1 by 2. The total wavelength of this particular dipole is like 1 by 2 of wavelength. Whereas monopole antenna, it is only one element, the other part will be ground. Right, you can see here this is a good example for monopole antenna. You'll have a ground plane, and then you'll have this particular element, which is lambda by 4, right. And coming to features of dipole antenna, dipole is a wire antenna fed at the center. As I said, it will be fed at the center, and it has one half of the wavelength, and the radiation resistance of this dipole is 73 ohms, which is very good, but it will be affected by affected or influenced by the presence of ground or any particular objects which is present in and around that particular antenna. And it can be usually mounted horizontally for better radiation pattern, right. And it has a directivity of 1.64 to 2.15 dB, right. And it is very good for short range communications, right. The only concern here is the size of the antenna. As I said, the presence of ground or the surrounding environment, right, the objects present in surrounding environment can influence the radiation pattern. But when used in indoor, right, due to multiple reflections, ceilings, fan, floor, like it will make this antenna to work very perfectly. That is, it will have good results in all direction because it is used in indoor, because of the multimode reflections which is coming from walls, floors, ceilings, all those things, right? And it is very convenient to use because it is easy to match between transmitter and receiver to its radiation resistance, right? And in spite of its higher efficiency, in spite of its attractive features, this is not commonly used for short range devices because of its length, because it's too large for many applications of portal, right? For small portal devices. So we go for monopole antenna, where in monopole antenna it is predominantly used in cordless telephones, cellular radios, walkie-talkies, right? A dipole can be mounted vertically, right? We can say a dipole that is mounted vertically, but in the dipole you will have only one element. If you take only one element and if it is placed in a perpendicular to a large metal or a ground plane, then that is called as monopole antenna, right? That is what given here. You can see one dipole element mounted perpendicular to the large metal plate, right? And or it can be a ground plane, and it is called as monopole antenna. And the length will be a quarter wave vertical element is used without a suitable ground plane. In some cases we don't need ground plane, and in most of the cases we will have ground plane, right? And the radiation resistance is much lower. That is, the dipole is capable of producing 73 ohms, whereas here it is 36 ohms. But due to the size, right, it is predominantly used. The electrical length can be increased and the capacitive reactance reduced by the winding at the bottom of the antenna can also be increased by number of coils, right? Number of coils in the ground plane, right? And this is about monopole antenna. So monopole antenna is nothing but taking one element from a dipole and using it as a like in a vertical direction. That is the monopole antenna, and it is predominantly used because of its size, right? And in this video, what we have seen is we have seen what is dipole and what is monopole antenna, how it is used for short range devices, right? Thank you, my dear students.